So in my excitement for today, I might have sent Naomi maybe three versions of this slide deck, just because there's always something coming up that could be more juicy or fitting as we take this shift in more like a holistic perspective of how we're approaching the journey. So I just wanted to say before we start that I'm super excited to be a part of Unpacked. And whether from today's sessions, we're looking at executing lifecycle at the organizational level, tactically in terms of design or data optimization, or strategically with a journey map. This day and tomorrow's session should remind every single one of us here about how critical our roles are as marketers and our functions in the space in creating and keeping more happy customers or users for my B2B folks. And ultimately, I think that we should all be sensing a common theme, and it's that there's a message for every stage of the journey, and our job is just to support someone going from stage to stage and kind of graduating over. So I'm going to go ahead and share my slides. Hmm. You know what? Let me upload them just to make sure we get the right set.
The ones that are currently uploaded, Thierry, are
Okay.
your most recent ones.
Okay.
I just changed the file name.
Got it. Okay. Perfect. Perfect. I was just making sure. Looks like we're getting some traction. Let's see. Fantastic. Is that visible for everyone?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, so welcome to the Why Behind the Buy, using storytelling to scale your sales. I'm Thierry Augustin. I'm a lifecycle marketing strategist here in New York, hailing from Brooklyn, and I'm happy to virtually see all of you. And inevitably, whenever I start to talk about storytelling as a performance lever, it begs the question, does anyone even read anymore? And it's usually a resounding no. And in some ways, we can see that the data supports that, right? This is from Litmus, and it says that almost 70% of email subscribers spend less than 8 seconds engaging with an email. So that's the hump that we're trying to traverse. And because of that, we know that attention spans are lower and lower each year. So we truncate our messaging, right? We're opting instead for shorter, punchier copy. And it works brilliantly, right? This is an example from Warby Parker, and it's short and it's quippy and it's beautiful and it kind of gets you right to the next step. But that doesn't mean that there isn't room for more, right? And we're going to really use this or focus on this as we talk about a message for each stage and again, each type of customer. So as good, data-driven, customer-centric marketers, we can choose to operate with a glass half full mentality, meaning that you can see the 70%, or you can see the 30% of subscribers that will actually spend more than 8 seconds on an email. And those people become our biggest opportunity for outsized returns. Now, no matter how much we wish this to be true, customers don't exist just to buy our products. They are a bundle of experiences that influence and inform their perspectives, their values, their habits, and their impulses, which we're trying to leverage, right? Psychologically, at least. So while most offers are easy to dismiss, right? You can spend less than 8 seconds and decide whether this is or this isn't for me. Stories are sticky because we're inviting those customers into another formative experience, something that can shift how they see things and how they interact with their world. And that's how we turn that very first crucial second of attention into two, into four, into eight, and beyond until subscribers can consistently realize that, hey, there's something worth reading here. So, email, we all know, can be absolutely amazing for quick wins, but it's ultimately a long game of building affinity to drive inclination. That means every time someone sees your name pop up in their inbox, they're more likely to open, to read, to click, and to buy. So it's all about tipping the domino. That's how I love to phrase it, because over time, just a little bit of leverage can create a massive amount of impact. And that's because, again, the theme, there's a message for every person at every stage. So I like to do things simplified, stepwise, so it's kind of easy to absorb and we'll kind of dig deeper into examples. But for me, the very first part is clarifying our anchor, right? And that's establishing a through line at the intersection of what customers care about and what we provide as brands or what we provide for our clients to help them boost their ability to be better brands. And the best brands have two things, right? They have a clear understanding and a commitment to execute the core of their messaging. Just these logos alone will show you, obviously, and anecdotally, how that works. I believe if any of us had probably purchased from every single one of these brands, and it's because whether they're focusing on something thematic like empowerment or self-affirmation or nostalgia, or something more practical like sustainability and local manufacturing or expert curation or unmatched performance, whatever it is, those brands absolutely own that anchor, right? They own that anchor and they continue to leverage how they use it in their messaging. Step two would be to focus your voice, right? And that's finding a sweet spot for our tone of voice and key verbiage that ensures that when our objectives or product assortment or even visuals change, right? When there's just something that's a new style and we're just testing creative, you still sound like you. And that always takes me to the understanding what resonance really is, right? When we think about it in terms of sound, it's like, okay, this frequency matches what I was expecting. And that's kind of the sweet spot that we're trying to hit when we focus our voice. And the third step is to explore your angles, right? How many ways can we share our anchor, right? Being that there's a message for each stage, we want to be able to accurately address the who, which is our customer profile and all the pain points that they're experiencing, the where, which is their position along the customer life cycle inside of that journey, and then our why now, right? Which is extremely important. And that's all of our RTB, right? Why should they believe in us? Why should they trust us? Why should they choose us over another competitor, another brand, whether you're in a position of being an industry stalwart or whether you're a challenger and you're kind of coming up and making your bones, you still have to be able to justify these three different aspects when someone does something super practical like receive an email in their inbox. And the reality is that storytelling is conversion copy, right? There's no kind of box for this is what conversion copy looks like, and it's headline, short subheadline with 3 lines, and then a strong call to action, right? Um, because whether the hero is the customer or it's the product, whether the conflict is personal or it's societal, and whether the solution is completely game changing and transformative, or if it just makes that customer's day just a little bit easier to deal with, the truth is that the same rules apply. Whether you're doing something truncated, super short and quick, or you're extending out and going for something more long form, even more personable, more vulnerable, right? You're still starting with a hook, right? You're pulling that reader in. And I like to think of subscribers, I guess, clue you in onto my perspective. I like to think of subscribers as readers, right? Not necessarily customers first, because as they're engaging with the email channel, as they're engaging with our creative assets, on social and things like that, there's still some aspect of reading that has to be done that convinces them to continue to follow down. So again, we start with a hook. We pull them in with emotion or curiosity. Then we make it personal, right? We write like we're talking to one person, right? And that's part of understanding where they are and who they are along the customer life cycle. For the third spot is to use cliffhangers and open loops to keep them reading, right? So part of that is like, how do we just breadcrumb our way, and again, tipping the domino so that they touch each stair or step on the staircase in order to get to where we ultimately want them, is to be an advocate. And then finally, we end with a strong call to action, something that feels natural but not necessarily pushy or forced. And so this is what it might look like across the lifestyle stage. So At the discovery level, maybe we're taking our time, right? We're building trust through our origin story, or our brand mission or ethos, or making the current market options or the completely lack thereof, right? Why we're here. That's the enemy. That's the thing that they should focus on and see that your brand is differentiating from the status quo. At the consideration level, maybe it's leveraging either positive or negative customer experiences, right? Things that are opportunities to learn, or educating the consumer about ingredients uh, or how to actually use the product, right, to make an informed purchasing decision. At the purchase level, maybe that means expounding on what key factors influenced, design elements or fabrications or formulations. And at the advocacy level, you're giving those customers who've already shopped, already had a great experience, reasons to share their experience with others, and showing them how their opinion can impact your collective corner of the world or the world at large. If you have social good initiatives, and CSR and things like that already kind of baked in to how you operate your business. The thing is, you do not have to completely overhaul your campaign strategy when we talk about storytelling. It's not something where this perspective is going to say, hey, everything is broken and we need to make a complete shift, right? Again, we're still playing the numbers game. So that's 70% of people who won't spend more than 8 seconds on an email. Of course, they're going to get a big amount of our attention simply because that's where the majority of the market is. But that 30% wants more. Those are the people who are actively looking for something to read, right? Be it books, ebooks, forums, long form articles, newsletters, if they're just like all over Substack. But these are the people who are looking for something to engage them so that they can have a long term journey, right? Not just a quick transaction. And I think that's where the focus needs to be redirected to so that we're supporting people who want to understand how they go from A to Z of a brand and not just A to B, just once we kind of like check off their first or second sale. But what does that Z point look like where we've kind of nurtured them all the way through? And this is an example, right? This is a golf apparel company, and part of that is to see, hey, how does this perform differently, right? How does it perform differently where we have a basic, quick, quippy, short bit of text that leverages them into the next step, which is to go buy directly, or something that invites them again into an experience because stories are sticky. How do we get them to see themselves, right? Not just in the shirt, let's say, but in the company as well, right? And give you, 250 bucks for a linen blend polo, right? You have to justify it. And part of the justification process, at least in my experience, has always been that it's story driven, that there's something that the customer, the reader, can latch onto, that they can understand, and then think, I can apply myself to the situation. I can see how I could benefit from purchasing this product. And that's what we're trying to elucidate, really, right? We're trying to shed light on how people can go from knowing about the product in a very, very general sense to seeing the product applied to them. Because again, email isn't just a marketing channel, it's a relationship builder. And in a world full of data and dashboards, it's easy to forget about the person on the other side of the screen. So this is a gentle nudge, not to just send more emails haphazardly or to just try to squeeze in more versions of storytelling, but it's to really examine the language around your brand. A great read that I would recommend is Wogadara's Unreasonable Hospitality. And one of the quotes from the book is that language is how you give intention to your intuition and how you share your vision with others. And part of that vision sharing process is, yeah, how do we look at our overall communication strategy to make things more attractive to the customer, not just for right now and to get them to, be profitable in the first 30 days. That's a very, very important perspective. But there's also the opportunity to say, how do we build with them long term? How do we build with them long term so that they stay sticky as a customer because we're continuously engaging them across every phase of the journey? And it's my encouragement that you can explore how many more doors of conversation you can open with the stories that you tell, right? And again, part of that was the first step is how do we clarify our anchor, right? What is that through line that is everywhere in our communication strategy? Two is how do we focus our voice so that we know exactly what terms and tone we're using. And for the third part, we're exploring our angles. We're seeing how many different ways can we share that anchor and make it such that customers start to recognize us, right, as a brand individually, not just as a product amongst a sea of products. But before this gets too like fluffy and nebulous, right? All of this stuff is are things that you can test and that you can track through your click maps, through adding positional nomenclature on your UTMs or sending surveys for preference of content style, right? One of the things that was highlighted a bit earlier is that the more data we get, the better questions we ask, the more data we get, right? That's how we get first party data. That's how we kind of focus in on what the customer is already wanting. And part of the strategy is to make sure that we're continuously not just testing, but receiving feedback from the customers and how they're choosing to engage with our emails. And it's not enough to churn out more marketing speak or reiterate product descriptions with ChatGPT. You should be, again, inviting customers into your universe, into an experience, so they can use that to formulate some new opinions, right? New perspectives, new values, new habits, and even new impulses related to your brand. And if you've identified this as something of a gap that you know that your team needs to kind of bridge, then I wanted to offer a messaging audit and voice alignment workshop just for the folks here at Unpacked. And part of that journey is really understanding what's working right now and being able to transition that through our testing and implementation framework to support growth as a lever. And part of that is to, again, we start by re-examining the competitive landscape, really getting an understanding of who your true competitors are, as opposed to just who are the big names in the space, establishing a messaging matrix, something that you can turn to and continuously review so that you know how to proceed forward with your communication strategy. We're going to uncover new audiences and RTBs so we can know areas of focus and little levers that we can pull along the journey to make customers more attracted to what we offer. We're going to revise brand language, which was part of this overall presentation, to really understand how to speak and how to create a through line so you always sound like yourself. And then finally, which is what all good marketers should do, is to implement, test, and optimize. So you can find that at thierryaugustin.com, myname.com/unpacked. And I would love to open it up for Q&A.
Amazing. I'm obsessed that there's a workshop that is attached to this in some capacity. I think that's so phenomenal. And for anyone that enjoyed this presentation, which it seems like quite a lot of people did, the Q&A is full of questions. I think a workshop would be a great thing to explore. And once we're done with Q&A, if you can pop a link to the workshop directly in the chat, I think that will be super helpful for people to find. But we'll start with some Q&A. So first question, this one came into my DMs. How do you balance storytelling with more transactional or promotional content in your email? I'm reading in between the lines here and maybe thinking the question is, how do you storytell with transactional emails? I could be completely making that up, but I'm going to let you run with it.
Yeah, I think the operative word is definitely balance. I mean, anytime we look at a flow from top to bottom, we're seeing that one, we can respond to a customer action, intent, or need, and then two, we have an ability to build brand, right? So it might not look like one email that has every single element, but it might look like, hey, first email has this, but the second email might say, based on what you purchased, here's a little bit of background about this design, about this fabrication, this formulation, what's something special about it that further kind of undergirds that they made the right decision. right? And I think that's what a lot of storytelling is to make the customer feel assured that they made the right decision, they chose the right company, they chose the right product. And a lot of that has to do with being able to create an experience around it. How did you get from ideation or concept to actually producing this thing, and why is it something that I will enjoy even before they receive it in the mail? I think there are little bits of story that we can add across every single touch point.
More like the behind the scenes look into things. Love it. All right, we've got a question here. What are some examples of great uses of cliffhangers and open loops?
Oh, fantastic. So part of it, I loved, and I shared it in the example with the golf company, is that they're starting with a basic question, right? To open it up is, does linen make a difference? After that, they go into saying how they tested it, where they were, and if anyone's a golfer, going to North Georgia in the summer is not it, right? It's not an enjoyable experience. So again, you're positioning that, and then you say, okay, what happened next? Right? What happened next? There's an opportunity for it to just have completely failed. You sweat it through or whatever, but based on that tone of that brand, it was just like very irreverent. So it starts off by saying, well, it worked okay, and then it goes back and says, no, we're being modest. It was fantastic, right? So being able to playfully engage a reader and give them little bits of just kind of uncertainty, that kind of opens up the rest of the conversation and encourages them to keep reading more.
Such a key point, like remaining open for conversation. I feel like a lot of people think that you just send an email and then be done with it, but maintaining some kind of back and forth is important. Okay. I need like an air horn for this one because it's like buzzword alert. But what about AI? Do you find you can use AI to help accomplish storytelling in any capacity?
I think it's very helpful when you already have an established tone and kind of understanding of what your messaging matrix is. I think it's dangerous when you don't, because then you end up sounding
Mm,
every other brand in the space. All it can do is kind of collect what's available. But if you have something that's already established, then it can be personalized to you. So definitely, I love it for speed of production and iteration so that we can go ahead and take something that might not be great, but we can edit it and kind of sharpen it and refine it. But if you're doing it based on having no clear direction already, then you're just setting yourself up for just kind of going into the sea of sameness.
mhm. So go in with strong brand standards and maybe some grammatical outlines, and then that will help you versus just winging it. All right, we've got this one here from Yadira. How do you find your anchor when what you promote is the performing arts? In the midst of variety, it's hard to differentiate yourself for when you must follow the artist's assets to the T. Feels like there's little room for creativity.
Oh, that's so interesting because it's such a creative space. So I think every
Mhm.
if there's an umbrella for the types of artists and types of productions that you put into play, that's where you're looking for your anchor. So we're promoting this type of performance art. Is it all kind of avant-garde artists, people who are, kind of shifting the dynamic or shifting the space? That just might be your lane, right? So I think part of that anchor point is to say, what's the commonality between all the artists that we feature, right? Is there something there? Is there a string again? Is there like a through line that says this is our type of person, right? Or our type of artist that attracts this type of person. So if you can kind of consolidate those two, then you establish the anchor a lot easier.
I like that answer. Another one here from Samantha Jade. By keeping emails shorter and more engaging, we rely more on the next step in the conversation to shape the overall flow experience after the email. Given this approach, what are your recommendations on how emails impact direct conversations compared to the website, where the team might have less involvement?
Yeah, this is interesting. So I always think about it holistically. I think Phil made a great point of this bridge between, marketing and product, and how we kind of understand what those next steps are. And just being able to see, oh, even seeing that Figma Jam board, right? Of like, okay, we click this happens next. If there's no continuity between those two things, I think that's where it gets dangerous. So I always think about it like a drop off, right? If there's a cliff, then that customer went from a really, really high experience with the email that they saw, that it was like beautiful and short, terse, but still like very engaging. then they jump to the product page and the product page is all over the place. So I think we have to, as email marketers in one setting, understand where we're taking people to, not just what we're presenting them, right? A lot of the interaction I see from an email perspective is like, hey, we presented something just like really pretty, but it's like, no, I need to see what the end is. And the end usually looks like what's the checkout flow, to be, super honest, right? That's like where we want to get them to so that they actually convert. So that middle ground of like going from email to checkout flow is where we have to look at the email and make sure that we're syncing that experience.
Yeah. Email QA doesn't just end like at the design of the email, it like continues on. It's a very, very important call out. All right. And then last question here. We work with many on the go clients, and even after reducing file sizes, slow load times can still prevent creatives from displaying. How do you approach storytelling in creatives on mobile when users might experience these loading issues, especially while keeping copy minimal?
This is interesting. So I'm looking at two things, right? When you say keeping copy minimal, I firmly believe that there's never a story that's too long, just one that's too boring. So if I'm thinking minimal copy already, then I'm just already giving myself constraints to say I have X amount of characters in order to accomplish this goal. Versus if I tell myself, hey, what story am I telling? Then I have kind of infinite iterations that I can pursue. So part of that might just be, hey, do we test something that's text based only, right? That we're seeing that a customer is here, let's see if they actually read, if they'll go through, and you can see, on the click map where they actually land or click off to the next, path, part of the path in their journey. So I think that framework overall would be what I really want to tackle, even with this talk, right? Are we looking at things as just saying, hey, we only have 3 sentences and they're going to kind of like give up? Or are we actively testing what story can I lead with that will get someone to get a full context of why this product or this event is important for them to be a part of, and then take the next step to become a customer.
I love it. It's very, very important to remember that. Okay, cool. Well, we have reached the end of our many questions that came through. Thank you so much for coming on board Unpacked. I loved your slides, first and foremost. They were incredibly easy to read. And I said this at the start of your chat. I feel like I'm sometimes the poster child for I don't read, an email marketer that like writes emails all day and hopes people read. I don't read myself. So I read all of your slides and I loved them. And so thank you so much for coming on board. I recommend you share your link again in the chat because I do think it would be super valuable for those that love today's session.
Thanks, Tammy.
No problem.